As somebody who's done some thinking and writing on Turkey as well. And as part of the DAHRENDORF series of events on European changing world, we're really pleased to have as our speaker here seminar series Professor Müftüler-Baç. For those of you who have followed Turkey's sort of difficult trajectory with the EU, Meltem is an indispensable author. She's been tracking the process, writing prolifically, thinking and publishing, but also convening events over many years. We're trying to work out when we first met with her, and we couldn't arrive at a definitive answer. And needless to say, these were much more hopeful times when Turkey was edging closer, and there was the negotiation with the EU, which is still happening on paper, but everyone knows it's a bit like in the socialism. We're pretending to be negotiating, and everyone is pretending to want to be part of the European Union or whatever remains of it. But there is no better person to try to engage with on those issues with Meltem, because what happened in Turkish academia, but also in policy thinking, is now the EU has fallen by the wayside. It's not a hot topic anymore. It's not fashionable, but it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. You just do the maths and look at trade flows, people, connections, and you realize, a bit like in the case of Britain, indeed, that European Union and Europe writ large is as relevant as ever. That's reflected also in public opinion surveys. So it would be great to have Meltem to tell us about how Turkey positions itself in this Europe where multiple or variable geometry, multiple speed integration is a thing as well, to use an expression. We also been lucky to have as a commentator Galip Dalay, who is our co-conspirator together with Meltem in the DAHRENDORF project. Galip is finishing his DPhil now at St. Anthony's, but he has a long career in various think tanks. He's the head of the Turkey program at Chatham House and somebody who bridges the world of academia and policy analysis, and he'll be reacting to what Meltem has to say. And also to just say a few words that Meltem is at Sabanci University, which is a long-standing partner of ours at CSOX at Oxford. I remember also, for instance, when Müftüler Sabanci came here to give a talk again in the most hopeful period. So apart from everything else, Meltem is involved in running a university department, being at Sabanci University. And she has seen some difficult times in Turkish academia as well. And there's a lot of experience both as an academic and as an analyst, and we're again very fortunate to have that. But without further ado, let me pass the floor to you, Meltem.
Thank you, Dimitar. Thanks a lot for this kind word. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so we can, if we can put it up. Well, first, let me just start by saying it's wonderful to be here. I know this room well. We did multiple workshops here before. We used to do more in the past because there was more give and take on both the British and the Turkish side with regards to the EU. And I also remember, Dimitar, in 2004, Otan would remember it, he invited in 2004 Tayyip Erdoğan, the Turkish Prime Minister at the time, to talk on Turkey and the EU. So he gave a major conference. Calypso was the moderator in one of the colleges, and there was a high table afterwards. In 2010, we had another conference here, again in Oxford, with Ahmet Davutoğlu, who was the foreign minister at the time on Turkish foreign policy. So a lot of Turkish policymakers, presidents, foreign policy ministers, prime ministers came through the Oxford walks and now talked about Turkey's EU vision. Now, things have changed, of course, tremendously in the last couple of decades. But while I'll be giving you a framework of the past and then try to predict some of the things in the future, I'd like perhaps to underline the fact that nothing in Turkish politics or European politics is predictable. Context has changed tremendously in the last 30 decades. I was just talking to the PhD students here at Oxford, who are, writing their dissertations on different topics. When I was writing my dissertation, the Cold War ended, Berlin Wall came down. On the first day that I was teaching international relations for the first time to an American audience, I was getting it in the US then. Iraq invaded Kuwait on August 2, 1990. So, we have been going through major fluctuating times, some of which, especially the more experienced members in the audience know it well. So the way that I would actually start my presentation is this. I don't see, despite the fact that I've been working on the European integration topic for the past 30 plus years, I don't see Turkey becoming a member of the European Union anytime in the future for multiple reasons. But these are, this doesn't mean that Turkey is now completely out of the EU. We already have, different types of relations. We have all kinds of projects analyzing it. So I'm going to be basically presenting a path of external differentiated integration in this talk. Can I have that thingy? The pointers. So, this is something that I am sure anyone who has read the European Commission reports over the past 26 years now, the first report was published in 1998 on Turkey, that there has been a significant change in the European Commission position towards Turkey and the way that it approached the possibility of accession and now, a different form of integration. So the European Commission's position here is very clear. Turkey is a key partner. And despite the fact that accession negotiations have begun in 2005 and then de facto frozen in 2018, the European Commission underlined the fact that this is a transactional relationship where there are, cooperation in essential areas of joint interest, from migration to security to trade to counterterrorism to transport to energy. It doesn't say that it is on the road to become a member of the European Union. Now, this is, of course, it is surprising given the fact that during the Cold War years, Turkey was an integral part of Europe. Again, some of us in the audience is very well aware of the fact that Turkey is one of the founding members of the Council of Europe when it was established in 1949. It became one of the first members of the OECD, the predecessor of the OECD. It became a member of NATO in 1952, 3 years before West Germany, for Council of Europe, before Spain, before Portugal, before any Central and Eastern European country that you can think of. Now, it is precisely for that position in the European order in the Cold War years that Turkey was invited, or Turkey developed these significant relations with the European Economic Community at the time. To give you a very quick background, it might be a repetition for some of you, but I still like to say, when the Rome Treaty was signed in 1957, and created the European Economic Community at the time, Turkey didn't know what was happening in the European integration process. We didn't follow it. But we were already part of all the European institutions of the Cold War years, Council of Europe, OECD, and NATO. So when we heard also that the Greeks have applied to something called the European Economic Community in 1959, the Turkish Foreign Ministry met immediately and they discussed among themselves. So there is another European institution and the Greeks have applied. So this is critical because if the Greeks apply to something in which Turks are not sitting there, the Greeks might change the discussions in the way for the Greek interest. So the prime minister called the foreign minister, the council of ministers met, and they were all discussing among themselves. What is this? What is this European Economic Community? And somebody said, well, it is an institution created for establishing eventually a common market with 4 fundamental freedoms, where freedom of mobility of goods, capital, people, and services will be realized. And then the minute that this was said, the Minister of Labor said, this is very bad. What if all the jobless Italians come to Turkey? Nonetheless, despite the fact that we can find all of these in the ministerial archives, the fact that it had European in it and the fact that the Greeks have applied for it meant that the Turks sent an application for membership to the European Economic Community. Now think of it, this is very important. Let's assume Galip here is not Galip, but he is Walter Holstein. He is the president of the Commission president, and he is now receiving these two things. He's looking at it, an application from Greece, an application from Turkey to the European Economic Community. Now he has to deal with this. These countries, according to the conditions at the time, are not fit to become members of the European Economic Community because they are still, economically less developed compared even to Italy, to the original six. But they are the first countries that signal an interest in the European Economic Community that nobody cares about. So Holstein has a challenge. He has to find a formula to establish a relationship with Greece and Turkey, but it is not full membership. It cannot be full membership. So for the first time, the European Economic Community, of course, it's been only, it's just published 2 years old, adopt something called an associate membership based on Article 237 of the Rome Treaty that gives Greece and Turkey a specific status that should prepare them for full accession sometime in the future. And with the Greeks, the Athens Treaty is signed in 1962. With the Turks, the Ankara Treaty is signed in 1963. Now, this is again very critical for multiple reasons. One, it actually indicates, well, for the Turks and the Greeks, an external influence on the European Economic Community. We just did a special issue at the Journal of Common Market Studies last year with colleagues on third country influence on the EU, and on the paper on Turkey, which I have, which I wrote, that was one of the original starting points, that this is how the European Economic Community found a way to deal with the Greek and the Turkish applications, which then replicated with Spain, Portugal in later years, Cyprus, the European Agreement, Central Eastern Europe. So the association agreement. Why is the association agreement with Turkey important, at least from the point where we are in 2024? It has been now, anybody who's born in 1963 is now 61 years old. So 61 years later, the Ankara Treaty still dictates the conditions under which the Turkish relationship with the European Union of today is shaped, because the Ankara Treaty states that with its Article 28, when both parties are ready to fulfill the obligations arising from membership, Turkey will become a member of the European Economic Community. Of course, this is a bureaucratic promise. It doesn't have anything that looks, at least in 1963, what the future European community would look like, what the member states who compose the European community might feel like deciding. But once you put it on writing in the way that it is legal, it becomes a binding commitment, pacta sunt servanda, which is, for the German Chancellor Merkel, a condition that tied her hands significantly when she was trying to deal with the Turkish case. Now, the association agreement, of course, does not mean Turkey will become a member. It just gives a legal basis for its eligibility. That's the reason why we have the progress report. That's the reason why Turkey is still in the enlarging process. That's the reason why today the European Union member states or the Commission can turn to Turkey and say at the beginning of the progress report, you cannot be a member of the European Union, you're not eligible, you are exactly a third country like Russia, like Morocco, like Israel. That answer is not possible because of the association agreement. Now, despite that, let's say, colorful beginning, at the beginning of the 2000s, when Dimitar and I have met, when Antony and I met, there was a significant period of time where Turkey's accession looked probable, precisely because of the way that the end of the Cold War brought Central Eastern European countries into the realm, precisely because there was a wave of optimism going around on Europe for the unification of the European continent. And Turkey felt, ready or starting to prepare for its membership. So in 1999, when the European Commission evaluating Turkish political criteria, the Turkish democracy in line with the Copenhagen political criteria, it recommended opening accession negotiations because Turkey fulfilled in 1999 the minimum level of criteria ready for negotiations to commence. And then the accession negotiations began in 2005, as you see here. But and that's how we have all these, meetings, all the preparations from early 2000s to 2008, 2009, perhaps until 2013. There was still a possibility of accession looming in the future. Turkey continued adopting the European rules, European acquis in its preparation, but relations were effectively frozen after 2013 when a wall for opening the chapters for negotiations was reached for multiple reasons. One is the European Commission multilateral veto adopted in 2006. Two, the French vetoes on 5 chapters ranging from financial to economic matters that Sarkozy adopted immediately when he came to power in 2007. And 3, Cyprus's veto of 6 chapters. So effective freeze here in 2013 means the chapters for negotiations that could be opened for actual negotiations were reached, and then in 2018 we actually have a significant freeze on the negotiation process. Last year, Joseph Borrell was given a task by the European Council to prepare a report on how to formulate a way out of the dilemma. And his report that you actually see there at the very last one basically suggests a renewal of activities in what the European Commission's key partnership implied, from energy, economics to transport to the high-level dialogues on counterterrorism. Now, in terms of what shapes Turkish-EU relations currently, these are the main factors that I would be going back and forth in my presentation. The leadership of the European institutions here matters significantly because of the role of the European Commission and the External Action Service in determining the path of Turkey's relations with the EU. But more importantly, bilateral vetoes from Greece, well, not Greece actually, from France and Cyprus determine the process. So if it is not membership, if you're no longer talking about membership, and also remember, membership is still there. It isn't gone. It still is an objective that everybody alludes to, as Dimitar have already said. But what can be what are the alternatives? Can we have a substandard accession? Can we have something that is different? And the answer that I give is basically driven by the external differentiation literature that we currently are developing in the last 5 years in the field of European studies, that looks into the specific types of arrangements, both de jure and de facto, that the European Union has with countries like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein under the EFTA arrangement, your trade and cooperation agreement that the UK has negotiated, but also, Turkey's specific relations and Switzerland also. They matter as alternative models of integration that are short of accession, that are not, that don't come together with membership. The second one that you actually see here is the strategic partnerships. this is what the EU is developing with third countries of significant clout that range from Russia to China. These were the first strategic partners, but also the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada. There are currently 10 official strategic partners that the EU officially says as strategic partners, but the 2022 strategic compass identified Turkey as one as well. But because it's an accession country, it cannot be officially identified with a legal arrangement as a strategic partner, because all others are, they are not in the accession process. Russia, China, Canada, Japan, India, South Africa. Did I say Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the strategic partners. Turkey cannot be. So what is the key dilemma here? If we are talking about an external differentiation, and if accession membership have hit a roadblock due to political factors, a key dilemma here is whether any form of functional integration can be possible without political conditionality. So, to what extent can the European Union allow a third country like Norway or Turkey to voluntarily align into the EU's internal market, like the external, like the EEA, like the European Economic Area arrangement? Can that be possible without a political context? Can it be possible with what the European Union increasingly sees as a country that is backsliding in democracy, in rule of law? If you looked into the 2024 report on Turkey, you can see there, for example, how the European Commission underlines the fact that despite the recommendations that it had in 2022, 2023, the Turkish level of preparedness in democracy, in the functioning of institutions, in judiciary, in human rights, still is falling is falling short. So without a political framework and without the EU accession process as a credible anchor for Turkey, political reforms in Turkey are losing speed. They have lost, as some of our colleagues here have already written and worked, they have lost their ability to push for more political reforms. Now, here is a paper that you probably cannot read, but if you want to see this table, this is from the 2023 GCMS paper. Here you will see the institutions, the policy areas, the way that all kinds of issues are there. So what this table shows you is that the Turkish-EU relationship legally is shaped by the Ankara Treaty, the Customs Union Agreement, the Helsinki Summit, the Helsinki Candidacy, the negotiations that began in 2005, which includes the accession negotiation framework, which is a legal document, the 2013 readmission agreement, migration-related joint action plan and Turkey-EU statement. Plus, I added here 3 more things. One is the high-level dialogues. The high-level dialogues are specific instruments that were developed for Turkish-EU relations that other candidate countries did not have, which indicates both the level of asymmetric power that Turkey has with other candidates, but also indicates the transactional character of the Turkey-EU relationship, because these high-level dialogues enable a continuation of cooperation, mutual alignment in policy areas that are of significant interest for both sides. Borrell added trade to this. There were economic, energy, political, counterterrorism, and migration. But these are significant precisely because they bring the counterparts, the Turkish ministers and the European ministers together in a regular setting where they align their positions in areas of mutual interest. EU agencies is important. One of my colleagues, Sandra Lavenix, works on this. The third country participation in EU agencies without membership is becoming a strong indicator of external differentiated integration. Turkey officially is a member of two EU agencies, the European Drug Smuggling Agency and the European Environment Agency. It has voting rights in both. There are 43 EU agencies, and out of these 43 EU agencies, Turkey participates in 18 of them. These are sectoral bodies that emerge beyond the European acquis, but EU members who are, official members of the EU are automatically members of the EU agencies. I don't know the exact situation for UK, but I have colleagues like David Finmore who are looking at the British participation in EU agencies. Of course, NATO and EU and Turkey combination is critical for the security dimension. Now, you're going to ask me what is this? This is actually a word cloud report on the EU's progress report. So what we have done with a PhD student of mine, we looked into the European Commission report. More word clouds are going to come soon. And we looked at the types of words that are the most visible, the highest, so the most visible words, the thickest notes that you can see are what the EU documents, a total of 863 documents are, by the way, giving this. They tell you what the EU emphasizes the most when it looks into the Turkish situation. So a few words that are important here: human rights, industry, program, producers, export, there is, or originating country somewhere there as well, exports and imports. So the EU has the highest number of keywords in its documents. When it talks about Turkey, the thickest notes reflect the most important words. So member states here is Greece, Cyprus, and France, right? That the EU talks about how Turkey cannot continue expanding its relations with the EU unless it has better relations with the member states. And I'll come back to this in a second. Let me show you other word clouds. We looked at two progress reports, 2012 and 2022, to identify whether there is actually a change. Because remember, we are looking at whether Turkey's relation with the EU could be seen as one of external differentiated integration. And in order to see whether this actually is verified with empirical data, I thought of trying to see what the 2012 before the effective freeze in the European Commission report was there, and what 10 years later in 2022 report could be seen. So one of the things that we are actually able to find in this word cloud that you are unable to see that much is the fact that if you look at it, you will see there is a higher note. Thickness of the notes represents the highest number of words. The thickest notes reflect political concerns. So there is a lot of emphasis on Kurds, democracy, terrorism, rights, regulations, alignment to political rules. Whereas when we look at the 2022 reports, these notes become weaker, but they are replaced by transactional areas. So there is more emphasis on migration. There is more emphasis on energy. There is more emphasis on the areas that the European Commission report have identified, less so on actual membership. Now, this comes together with the Turkish external differentiated model, which is driven by its economic ties. So to see that, we took upon, again, this is with a PhD student of mine, we took upon all the trade documents and the trade related figures from Turkey statistics, from OECD, from European statistics offices. And we looked at how the trade between Turkey and the EU could have increased from 1995 to 2000, well, the last date is from 2023. 1995, we have chosen it because it's the customs union agreement, and you can see an actual upward trend. But to see whether this actually is changing at the member state level, because remember the European Commission identifies member states as the key. We looked at which members have the highest level of trade with Turkey on exports and imports. Of course, Germany ranks the first, but for you guys, what might be interesting is the UK. UK is not bad either. So EU exports to Turkey from the UK are at a very significant level. And one of the other things that you are not going to see here, but what I'm looking at is the way that German and British documents talk about Turkey versus the countries which have the lowest amount of trade with Turkey, such as Lithuania, Ireland. So there is actually a correlation with the fact that the higher the number of exports and imports is very similar, that the member state has with Turkey, the higher their official foreign ministry documents refer to Turkey and Turkish accession. So when I looked at the German foreign ministry documents, I was able to see that there is a much higher level of reference to Turkish accession, to Turkey and Greece, to the Cyprus issue, to Eastern Mediterranean, compared to, let's say, France, compared to United Kingdom as well. And when you look at the imports, UK is a bit lower, but as you can see, Germany dominates in both exports and imports, which brings me to one of the, and these are the top 10 EU member states, which brings me one of the key findings here, which is that Germany has played a significant role from the very beginning to today, to 2024, in shaping Turkey's relations with the EU. To the extent to which, for example, when the association agreement was negotiated in 1960s, in early 1960s, before 1963, Germany needed Turkish workers. In early 1960s, Germany's labor market was in need of skilled workers. So Germany and Turkey signed in 1961 an agreement for Turkish government's acceptance of sending Turkish workers to Germany, and then Germany turned to the European Commission and asked for the same agreement, its incorporation into the Ankara Treaty as well. So as early as 1961, Germany's specific relationship with Turkey influenced the European Union's policies towards Turkey beyond even accession negotiations or accession was being discussed there. Now, this co-occurrence, this is in another forthcoming paper, indicates something here. I'll just tell you what it indicates. It indicates a change in the European Commission's evaluation of Turkey's possibility of being a member. In 2012, when the negotiations were still going relatively on track, they were not effectively frozen, the European Commission documents reflected a higher level of optimism towards Turkey with an emphasis on an expectation of political alignment, okay? Because political alignment is necessary if you're going to become a member. In 10 years' time, the European Commission reports, we are still looking at the same type of a relationship, but the negotiations have stalled, membership has become less likely, and instead the European Commission no longer talks about political alignment in the same fashion. It no longer emphasizes all types of expectations that it would have from an acceding country like a Western Balkan country, but instead there is more transactionalism here in these. This is, I already said this before, which brings me to the final thing. For external differentiated integration to continue, we are now in need of a revitalization of customs union. Some of you have already known this well. There has been a lot of talk on this. The European Commission already prepared the draft document for the revitalization in 2016. Unfortunately, it has been vetoed by Germany and it's sitting in the council since then. Again, the German factor. So as a conclusion, I have a few things that I'd like to underline, okay? First, accession is not likely. That's a given. However, Turkey is not an outsider. It is an integral player of the European Union. Okay? And the way it's an integral player cannot be unwound. It cannot be reversed because of the level of trade integration it has. You've already seen it. Turkey is the fifth largest trade partner for the EU. EU is Turkey's still first trade partner. And Germany, among the EU member states, have the highest level of trade. Turkish external trade for Germany is essential, and it is there to stay. So the trade integration already indicates that even though there is no European Economic Agreement, type of an agreement between Turkey and the EU, the trade integration from the level of volume of trade to the Turkish voluntary alignment to the customs union tariffs, to the extent to which European Commission actually says Turkey aligns 99% to the EU trade rules in industrial products. So that level of integration is an indicator that Turkey is in the EU framework, okay, with or without membership. However, a key question is that this is, of course, for that to be permanent, durable, stable, more institutionalized agreements like the external, like the EEA might be needed. And more importantly, the EU's ability to keep Turkey anchored to its system depends on some kind of a credible commitment. That doesn't have to be accession anymore, but another type of a critical commitment is needed. And since we are talking about external differentiation and external differentiated integration has formal and informal agreements. So Norway is a good example. Iceland is a good example. UK is a good example, but UK's trade and political cooperation agreement is actually relatively less compared to Turkish customs union. Turkey is a good example. Switzerland is a good example. These are all countries that are in the EU framework without being members. So the next step would be, or the next question would actually be this. None of the other European countries that have an external differentiated integration with the EU need the EU anchor to be democracy. Nobody questions Norwegian democracy. But in the Turkish case, the EU anchor was important for democratic change. So how can, and this is actually a very delicate balance for the EU to maintain, how could the EU, there's already a huge literature on it, but still, it still is a valid question. How could the EU maintain, let's say, its transformative power on the EU, or whether it even has transformative power, because Hungary and Poland has already engaged in certain aspects of those questions. But still it matters because, as long as you're trying to get in, you want to do certain things to politically align. How can the EU's transformative power be kept if the accession process is no longer viable or credible? So those are my.
Well, thank you so much, Meltem, for this perspective and highlighting the institutional and the functional links that still keep the thing together. And it's probably a good place to invite Galip to chip in, and somebody who reflects on the geopolitics, but also the ideational side of things, where Turkey has diverged dramatically from the EU. But equally, you've written, Galip, that Turkey remains part of the strategic West. Even though its leadership hopes that if Turkey is alternative and it's going its own way, there's different realities, so there might be a bit of an overlap. What Meltem had to put on the table and what you had.
Well, I think Meltem just put so well, so I have right now quite difficulty to what add, but probably I will be adding three things. First, the nature of relationship between Turkey and the West. I mean, during the Cold War with Europe, during the Cold War, obviously the geopolitics and then the international security environment was quite a major factor. But since end of the Cold War, and I think, as you put it, until 2013, the domestic political transformation, the Europe will be being the reference point for Turkey's domestic political transformation. That was like quite a powerful element when it comes to Turkey's different democratization, Turkey's different reform agenda. And right now, the tragically, since 2013, unfortunately, we see the decline and then the loss of this reference point when it comes to Turkey's domestic political transformation. And once again, what starts the engagement between Turkey and the West, it's not like democratization, it's not this transformation of domestic political transformation, but it is the geopolitics. It is the great power competition. It is the neighborhood basically collapsing. It is the result of this neighborhood, whether it is terrorism, whether it is migration, and whether it is new form of the regional order that are in making. And I think that generates some question about what should we expect in terms of the future of Turkey's relation with the West, with Europe, and in general. I think 3 points are quite key. One of them, and obviously today I'm just coming from the Berlin Foreign Policy Forum, and the big question on topic was European security. The German Foreign Minister spoke about in a very depressing way. And I think what was very interesting, the Danish former Minister of Denmark said, we have to think the European security not only with less America, but with less Germany as well. Yeah. I think that was quite reflective of the mood of the time. And this brings us to the question of, okay, if this is the case, then how we are going to have the European security, or what will be the pillar of this European security? And that brings the question of Turkey on the agenda as well, too, as it does also the question of UK. So at the time when Russia is clearly, unmistakably, is in the enemy camp, at a time when the Trump America's commitment to the European security and NATO itself as well, at best is questionable. At a time when there are wars in European eastern and southern neighborhood, at a time when there are significant overlaps and interlinkages between the security dynamics of the Black Sea, Eastern Mediterranean, South Caucasus, and Middle East, and this is being European neighborhood. I mean, the Russia's Eastern Mediterranean presence is very much dependent on its Black Sea fleet. To me, it's very clear you cannot have European security question debated in any serious manner by not including UK, by not including Turkey, and today by not including Ukraine into the debate as well. And for me, right now, what is imperative is to bridge the gap between the EU and non-EU NATO members when it comes to the question of the European security, because this is not EU security, this is European security, and the European security can only be addressed in a holistic manner. And there, I think what kind of role Turkey will play in the country. Secondly, it's the shared neighborhood. Whether the Turkey and the European role in the shared neighborhood will be competitive or cooperative, whether it will be a rival or partner in their shared neighborhood. In the last 6, 7, 8 years, this role was discussed more within the framework of rivalry, particularly in reference to the southern neighborhood, in reference to the Eastern Mediterranean, which pit the EU member states, EU candidate states, and NATO countries against each other. Because it pit Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, France, and also quite many Middle Eastern countries into the pit against each other. That posed a fundamental question, not about the security in the neighborhood, but also the European security. So really the big question is, going forward, whether the Turkey and Europe will become partner or rival in their shared neighborhood. I think related to this too is this talk about strengthening the European pillar within the NATO. Once again, investing in the defense industry, so having like a very strong and functioning European defense industry, and that brings the question of Turkey once again on the agenda. Because does the strengthening of the European pillar within NATO, which is quite crucial, particularly if we think that the Trump will prioritize the China and probably will have less commitment to NATO compared to the previous one. So what does the question of strengthening European pillar within NATO means? And who does this include? Does this include Turkey or not? And again, like the defense industry, like strengthening the European defense industry, will this include Turkey? Because Turkey has a very significant and growing defense industry. Will Turkey's defense industry capability be integrated into this process, or will it be left outside of it? I think that brings us also to another question that will define the future of this industry. Exactly as Meltem Hocam said about the customer union and then the economic dimension. The Turkish economy still essentially remains anchored disproportionately within the European and Western economic ecosystem. Despite all the search for finding money in gold, like going to China, despite all these things, the Turkish economy is still anchored in the West, and the West is still the major source of the direct investment, trade, etc. But the question is, how do we see the trends going forward? To what extent the Turkish economy being anchored in the West will be the case going forward? For time being, yes, it is. But I think this is particularly important at a time when we discuss the redesign of the supply chains as a result of the great power competition and as a result of the dependency reduction on Russia and China, but actually on China, because Russia is not really a major production power. So as a result of great power competition, as a response to the reducing the dependency on China in supply chains, to what extent the Turkish economy will benefit from this process? Will Turkey be Europe what, let's say, Mexico is to US when it comes to supply chains, when it comes to the Turkey providing this in a certain capacity? I think that brings us to the next question, is what Meltem Hocam said, the customer union modernization. And I think this is really key when we discuss the future of Turkey being anchored in economic terms within the West. And there's like a big gap between also Turkey and the European understanding. For Turkey, it is an economic matter, technical matters. And particularly when you talk to German, it's really a political matter. The veto is political, the process is political. So until this is being breached, now I see I'm a bit more hopeful, because it seems the security concerns that I'm seeing in Germany with the German elite probably will make it a bit more accommodating towards Turkey. We also see this right now, the German removing some of its veto regarding the sale of the Eurofighters, and talk about it, or like regarding getting rid of some of other previous intransigencies. But this is really important, to what extent the Turkish economy will remain anchored within the Western economic ecosystem. Particularly right now, I see more and more among Turkish elites, the China creating more and more temptation. The BRICS creating more and more temptation, even though the BRICS is really not a real thing, doesn't have a substance, it's more of a platform. But nevertheless, BRICS provides two things. One of them is a powerful narrative. It's not an alliance, but it's a powerful narrative. It doesn't provide a vision of international order, but it provides a powerful narrative of delegitimizing the current international order, which also Turkey subscribes to it. Second thing, not today, but what I see on the mind of many Turkish elites, what does it mean in the future in terms of potential economic opportunities? So it's not today, it's more like the future oriented. And then this brings us to another point, which is, will Turkey, Europe, and the US see eye to eye on the great power competition? Because historically, Turkey's relationship with the West has been very much defined by the global processes, by the global security environments. And that's why the Turkey joining the Paris Agreement in 1856 more or less has the same logic Turkey joined the NATO membership in 1952. Because it was again the Turkey with France, with Britain, and with glorious Sardinia, they fought against Russian Empire. And as a result of Turkey was invited to join the Paris Agreement. And for the Turkish elite, that was really a glorious moment, because it offers two things at the same time: security vis-a-vis Russia, a geopolitical identity, because it was very important to be regarded as a European power, so to be at the top table, and status. So it's also you are at the top table of the global order. And similarly, NATO provided same. It was a Soviet threat, because that was the motivation for Turkish elite, so desperate to seek the membership in NATO. So that means security vis-a-vis Soviet Empire, again, the Western geopolitical identity, and again, status, because right now we are also part of the most important alliance in the world, which is the NATO. And historically, it was always the Russia that was the glue, geopolitical glue, that brought Turkey and the West together. The question today is, will Russia or China, at the time of the new great power competition, solve the same process? Because what I see an aberration of the last 5-6 years is the policy towards Russia. Because historically, from the late Ottoman Empire to the modern Republican era, I think there was a very clear consciousness of the elite, which not antagonize Russia, but always counterbalance Russia. So you should not antagonize because it's a major power, so you have to pay a cost. And the best way is to always seek different counterbalancing strategies vis-a-vis Russia. That does not mean that Turkey did not engage in significant cooperation with Russia. It did, even on the heavy industry during the Dimitar in 1960s. But I think there was a major difference of the last 4, 5, 6 years, which was the Turkey engaged in defense industry cooperation with Russia, S-400. This is quite novel thing. A significant geopolitical cooperation with Russia, Syria, Libya, Nagorno-Karabakh, that is also very negative. And narrative similarities, even though Erdogan and Putin's, there is a similarity in their narrative of anti-Westernism, but their policies are completely different. Because for Turkey has been very supportive of the EU and NATO enlargement, whereas for Russia, this is the ultimate nation security threat. But there was a significant convergence of narrative of delegitimizing or criticizing the Western-led international order. So right now there is an aberration vis-a-vis Russia, but I think the good news that I'm hearing, that I'm seeing, not hearing, so the reduced Russia after the Cold War, or the perception of reduced Russia, was previously what it made it also possible Turkey not to be that concerned about Russian revisionism. But now you have a resurgent and revisionist Russia. I think that will induce once again the counterbalancing strategies among the Turkish elites, more and more when the competition is moving from places like Middle East to Turkic world, the Central Asia and South Caucasus, which Russia regards as its spheres, its major spheres. So the question that I see is how, to what extent Turkey and Europe will see eye to eye with Russia, but most important also on China. On China, I see that Turkey and Europe having problem with the US at the same time. On China, I think that Turkey and Europe's approach, there are differences, but at its essence, it's not that different. Because in the end, for US, this is actually the top dog of the international politics. And neither European nor Turks are the top dog of the international politics. I think the sense of threat perception that is emanating from China in Europe and in Turkey is not as strong as it is in the US. So in the new period, I think not only Turkey, probably Europe will also have more problem with the US. And then finally, I mean, in terms of Turkey, the West, also what Dimitar initially pointed to it, I think many learn not to look at the West as a wholesale thing. So in a sense, there are different Wests for different guns. So there are different categories of the West. The political West, which for a long time meant the West served as a reference point for Turkey's domestic political transformation, is no longer there. And I think this is a global crisis. It's not only a crisis in Turkish-Western relationship. This is really a global crisis at a time when the decline of the reference point is taking place when it comes to democratization, reform, human rights. This is a global crisis that we'll all experience going forward. So the political West is not as powerful reference point for Turkey as it used to be. The cultural West, which for a long time meant modernity and secularism in the Turkish context, the governing party had more anxiety vis-a-vis. The opposition is more embracing this part, the cultural West. So it's the different part of society has different relationship with the cultural West. The third one is the economic West, where the government and opposition both of them love it, because it means, the trades, the cost of minimum organization, all of them. But the geopolitical West, where I think will define the future of the relationship, and there the picture is mixed. So the geopolitical West, on the one hand, for instance, this is my perception of Turkey's approach in Ukraine. Turkey doesn't want Russia to win in Ukraine, but Turkey doesn't want Russia to lose in Ukraine. So it's, I used to say Turkey is pro-Ukraine without becoming anti-Russia. Because for Turkey, Russia losing in Ukraine means resurgence and unchecked resurgence of the West. And Turkey in its neighborhood right now, particularly in the Middle East, in Syria, elsewhere, it sees that there's quite many competitive elements of its interest with the West. So therefore, when it comes to geopolitical West, Turkey has mixed picture, and it's not only with the government, it's the same with the opposition as well. Even if the opposition is power, yes, there will be more nicety, etc. But I think there will be this anxiety with the geopolitical West. On the one hand, you embrace it, you need the West, like vis-a-vis counterbalancing, let's say Russia, and tomorrow maybe even China. But at the same time, you yourself are also concerned about the geopolitical West, because there are like quite growing number of the areas where your and Western interest seems to be at odds with each other. We saw this in Syria, we saw this in Eastern Mediterranean. So this is where I see that not having a clarity in terms of how Turkey relates with the geopolitical West. But my projection is going forward, probably we will see more convergence.
Right, on this hopeful note.
Yes. I have to finish with more notes.
Well, it's good that you mentioned perception, because Tim and Mark Leonard and Ivan Krastev published a paper a year ago. Was it based on a polling that the DAHRENDORF program, together with the European Council on Foreign Relations, conducted in a number of countries around the world, including Turkey. There is a second edition coming, so stay tuned. And one thing that transpired amongst many interesting findings in the polling, in the survey, is that the way Turkey, but also probably Russia, sees the future differs from China. So China is comfortable with G2, overall the two superpowers. Russia being weaker, but also Turkey is gunning for multipolar, or polyphonic, as Putin put it 2 days ago in the Dalay worlds, that where they're not keen on having China as a top dog or as a bipolar structure. So that's an interesting convergence on the narrative, with more subtle. But let's stop here and collect your questions. I'm sure there'll be plenty. So, Caroline, if you could introduce yourself and.
Thank you very much. My name is Caroline Tundell. I'm a third-year DPhil candidate here in international development. Thank you. This was super interesting. I have a question on Turkish domestic politics and how this plays into it. So we've talked a lot about Turkey. I think you mentioned like the opposition and how they probably not see things very much differently. How do you think, or what kind of a role do you think do Turkish domestic politics play in the relation between the EU and Turkey? And maybe more specifically, we've seen a lot of things happening on the Kurdish issue recently. So I'd especially be interested in your opinions, your thoughts, if there's anything that's being discussed between the EU and Turkey on those issues.
So hold your fire. Let me collect a few more questions.
David Blackman. I used to work in Turkey 40 years ago, so it's a long time ago. What are the main differences between the government and the official opposition? I presume. Can you briefly summarize? Is this a major debating issue or quietly discussed rather than in major public debate?
Okay. I think I saw you first. Then.
Oh, okay.
And then.
Yes, I'm Brendan Devlin. I'm the European Union History Fellow here at St. Anthony's, and previously at the Commission, where I wrote the reports. But I'm so
That I analyze.
so glad that somebody has read them
Analyze word by word.
and analysed them too. If we'd known that, we'd have written them better. I wanted to ask about things that didn't happen in EU-Turkey relations, particularly in my area, which is energy. In your list of significant dates, there was no mention of the 2005 Energy Community Treaty, which was offered to Turkey to sign, and they refused to sign it. It was specifically written to allow Turkey to sign without, because it's an internal market arrangement agreement, it was specifically designed to get around Cypriot veto, otherwise Cyprus would have vetoed it at the time. So that opening was turned down by Turkey, and it's puzzled us ever since. The second date that I would bear in mind is the 2008 signature of the Nabucco Treaty, which Turkey signed and ratified and got on the front page of the Financial Times, and then spent 3 years undermining up until 2012, 2013. And the third one, the third significant date for something that didn't happen, was the 2012 Iran sanctions, where a specific carve-out was written for the Turks on energy, but they refused to use it. So one of the things that we in Brussels are always wondering about is, why does Turkey actually act in this way? Because it could have maximized its negotiating power by first being in the energy community, so having a role in European Union law as an equal partner. Secondly, being Nabucco, which had 6 suppliers on Turkey borders, and you have to bear in mind that although we've had the war, at that time we'd had 2 cut-offs from Russia, 2006 and 2009. So Turkey would have been in the most powerful situation. And in the Iranian discussions, would have had some influence on our policy on the sanctions, and then some influence with Tehran about the implementation of the rules on the Turkish-Iran border. So we're always puzzled by Turkey, because it always fails to take the strategic gift that we try to give it. I wondered if you could comment on that.
So, would you mind, I'll correct, pass it back and then come down to you. Maybe,
Okay,
yes.
no, all very
answers on
good
the
questions. Shall I start with energy?
Oh, it's up to you.
Well, I don't work on energy, but all your comments, the energy treaty, the energy community, the Turkish desire not to, Turkey actually needs, one of the things that we actually have on the energy related thing, Turkey is complying with the EU acquis on energy. It's part of the electricity grid. It's now part of, a number of things with regards to alignment, but its main reservation is this. Again, based on the documents that I was analyzing, the minute it becomes part of the energy community, it would have opened the Turkish energy market to companies that are, or suppliers on the European, in the European Union, to compete in the Turkish energy market too. So that's what I think is the main reservation that Turkey has to the energy community, which is, I'm sure, what they told the European Commission at the time. This is also This is also part of the reason why the public procurement policies and Turkish alignment in public procurement is not going at a speed that the European Commission wants to see, because Turkey wants to keep its market, or the Turkish government, let's say, wants to keep its market at least close to the competitors from the EU prior to membership. That's one thing. The Iranian deal, I'm sure SU would also, have something to say on it. The Iranian nuclear deal was actually something that Turkey wanted to do as a diplomatic tool for itself, together with Brazil. And it was a way of making Turkish voice heard more in the diplomatic circles rather than be part of a smaller voice of the European Union. But I really want to talk to you more on this precisely because, there are energy is one thing, readmission agreement. I was told that in 2016, I'm trying to find a way of putting it in a delicate manner. In 2016, the visa liberalization was about to be finalized. We Turks are subject to Schengen visas, or the majority of the Turks are subject to Schengen visas, and it is becoming a very burdensome process. And in 2013, when the readmission agreement was signed, there were all these steps that were expected from Turkey to complete so that it would have a visa-free regime like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia was attaining. And in 2016, they came to the very last point that this was going to be realized. But it was going to be under Ahmet Davutoğlu, who was the foreign minister at the time, who was going to make it public. So he was held internally by an unnamed Turkish politician, you know who. And therefore, this move wasn't made, and that was that window of opportunity that opened and then closed, and now it still is not there. So this could tie back to the previous questions. It's not necessarily between government and domestic opposition, but within the government, there are multiple layers of internal competition as well. So that, and this is not unique to Turkey anyway. I mean, in Germany, we have the same thing. In France, we would have the same thing. So when you have possible opportunities that arise that could be taken upon by the Turkish, German, French government, precisely due to who is going to get the credit type of a decision making, this could be an opportunity lost. Coming back to Tuncay question. Now, if you want to look at domestic politics, now, since you're doing a PhD in international relations,
International development, yes.
yeah. Well, I'm a professor of IR. And in international relations theory, we have this, very clear distinction between realism and liberalism as two competing paradigms. And if you're a realist or a neo-realist, and I tend to be more in that camp, you would basically look less on the role of domestic factors, because domestic and foreign policy are separate realms. So this ties, both of your questions are similar into that way. I mean, is there an internal division inside Turkey with regards to the EU? Does different political parties adopt different positions towards the EU? It's a critical research question. I try to answer it in multiple ways. To give you a very quick example, in 2003, I interviewed all the Turkish parliamentarians in the Turkish parliament. Was it 2003? I published a paper in 2003, so 2002. The interviews were done in 2002, before the 2003 elections. Okay, in 2003 November, we have the new election and the AKP came to power. But before that, we had the ANAP, the Social Democrats, the everlasting, never dying Devlet Bahçeli from the Nationalist Action. Yeah, I mean, the guy is gonna live until 100, I think. So he was there in 2002, he's still there in 2024. I don't know what's gonna happen in 2046. So we interviewed all the parliamentarians in 2002, and we found out that there is no difference across the political parties with regards to their stance on the EU. The nationalists the way that they define themselves nationalists, had the most extreme position, of course, in meeting the political criteria such as the death penalty or lifting of the certain types of penalties or reforming the state security courts or getting rid of the Nation Security Council, everything that happened after 2002, 2003. They had the most hardline position on that, but all the others, the Social Democrats and the right-wing, politically center-right parties, they had the same position. The perceptions of the European Union were, Galip's comments there were very interesting in that economically, all the political parties want the EU connection to continue. Politically, more or less, there is an equal way of seeing what the EU is doing, without major differences. And interestingly, it's easy to talk about without data. We did the same thing, or I did the same thing when I tried to understand political parties' positions on the Syrian refugees. So, if you have a document, you analyze it, right? So, for the European Commission documents, that's another thing. We did the same thing with the parliamentary deliberations. So again, with another PhD student of mine, we looked into the parliamentary deliberations on the Syrian refugees and tried to see whether there was a difference between political parties in the way that they perceive and talk about the refugees. With the exception of the Democratic Party, which comes from the more Kurdish minority side, there was no difference. And the way that they talk about the Syrian refugees, their integration, and the EU's role in that were very similar. So while it might seem that domestically there is a difference among political parties on multiple issues, there is actually very little difference. Yeah.
Well, just, I don't have anything to add actually on the energy one, so just to add on the domestic political one. Since the end of the Cold War, but we can take it also, we can go a bit further as well. So during the 1990s, up until let's say 1998-ish, so you have on the foreign policy front, the geopolitical front, quite, despite the differences, but largely convergence with the West. But on domestic politics, quite divergence. So you have like a very significant democratic regression, human rights violation, etc., Kurdish issue, all of that. And the Turkish-Western relationship, particularly the Turkish-US relationship, was in quite good track. Because particularly when it comes to Turkey-US, it was the security and geopolitics always trumped with the domestic politics. In Turkish-EU relationship, the picture was more obviously complex, so there was quite significant criticism of Turkey, etc. But nevertheless, it was still functional. Starting from the late 1990s and the first decade of 2000s, we see foreign and domestic political convergence, and this is also one of the best periods of Turkish-European relationship. You see the domestic political convergence, the reform packages of late 1990s, early 2000s, you see a golden era in Turkey-Greece relationship. So there is significant convergence, and this was also a very good period in Turkish-Western relationship in general. And over the last decade, there's decoupling on foreign security policy and domestic policy at the same time. And this is probably the most turbulent period, one of the most turbulent periods in Turkey-Western relationship. So going forward, which one do I think is the primary driver when it comes to Turkey-West? When it comes to Turkey-West, I see the geopolitics and the security and foreign policy being the more important than the domestic politics in shaping the Turkish-Western relationship. I think the more challenging for the West was having a democratic but on foreign policy ambitious Turkey. Because dealing with a democratic and ambitious Turkey would not be that easy. Because now an authoritarian and undemocratic Turkey, you're being annoyed, you are being, very angry, etc. But to some extent, you have a toolbox, transactionalism here and there. But a democratic but on foreign policy ambitious, and also on major on some of the major files, the one that can also diverge from the West, probably that would have been much more difficult for the West to handle. Because it would not be easily to reject, but it would not be also easily to embrace, given what we are seeing. Again, I think if the opposition, let's say, won in the last elections, I think we would have had much better climate in Turkish-Western relationship, because we would have, much kind words or diplomatic style, etc. But the essence of this relationship would have still remained quite split. Because the opposition in its form that was going to win the election would not be able to make major progresses on some of the major identity questions. It would have changed the system, probably the parliamentary system. It would have used a much more diplomatic language towards the West. Probably some of the, Osman Kavala, Dimitar would have been released, and obviously that would have injected a significant optimism and positive atmosphere to the relationship. But the essence of relationship, what form of relationship that Turkey and the Europe will have with each other will still remain unaddressed. Because this is not only a question of democratization, because effectively Turkey's EU process was killed at the time that Turkey was actually introduced into one reform package after Erdogan.
Yeah.
So it was killed in 2004, 5, 6, 7. So it was what Merkel said, no matter what Turkey does, there is no membership prospect. This was like one of the most reformist era in Turkish history.
Sarkozy.
Sarkozy and Sarkozy as well. Merkel, Sarkozy, and then like all this talk about bringing Turkish membership to referendum. And then you have the France, you have the Cyprus issue in an unresolved nature. So the Turkish-Western relationship was killed in a very funny way. It was when it was the most promising. It was also this is the time when it was killed at the same time. The
May I
membership
ask
level.
you a question?
Sure.
For me, Turkey is part of the West. But in your,
I see also, I said the West, but I see a hyphenated identity.
okay,
I have been arguing that right now,
Okay.
as for personality individual, we
okay.
use hyphenated identity. You can be African American or Italian American.
Okay, so
I think we
Turkey-
should use it. We should use it for geopolitical identities as well.
Okay,
So the
there's
countries.
no binary opposition in your mind then.
No, I think the Turkey still largely remain West.
Okay.
But it's also not a traditional Western countries from the current policy, etc. I see Turkey more like a Muslim France. And I see the Turkey and France being very similar to each other, two post-imperial states with overstated idea of the role and grandeur in international affairs. The trouble with them, they are competing in the same geography. With Turkey, if one of them located in Latin America and another one in Europe, probably they would have much more appreciation for each other. Because what I see essentially, it's the similarity of Turkey and France that causes that much trouble,
But
not their differences.
That's a good observation, because
Yeah.
if you look at the European debates, whenever sanctioning Turkey or pushing back against Erdogan was an issue, France would take a muscular approach, saying
Yeah.
Turkey is our adversary, maybe not the enemy, but certainly a rival adversary. But then Germany will step in and say, no, all this interdependencies, let's hurt Turkey.
That's precisely what happened in 2020
Yeah.
summer.
So-
France was moving into Eastern Mediterranean. We have any German seat? The German foreign minister shuttled diplomacy.
Yeah.
Heiko Maas came to
Yeah.
Turkey, calmed everyone down, and then
So the
basically,
German instinct with neighbors, including
Yeah.
Russia until the invasion, was to actually double down on
But
economic.
I think for Germany, Turkey is more domestic politics, for France, it's
Sure.
more geopolitics.
Sure. And then the UK is interesting because the UK has always been on the German side.
For UK, is like we are two post-imperial states on the edges of Europe.
But also the
SG.
security, but SG and then go around and then open.
Thank you very much. I don't know how you did that, but it was a wonderful seminar on such a dispirited, disheartening topic. And it was a tour de force. Thank you for both of you. I would like to understand one thing about this strategic partnership
Mhm.
thing. Are there anyone in the foreign policy atmosphere in Ankara really studying the Brexit example and considering this seriously? And if there is, how would then this German how would Germany react to such a proposition?
Can I answer very, very quickly? This is a perfect question. So what we did was, in the past 4 years, we were part of a large, another H2020 project on European foreign policy. And Sabanci team, we were responsible for strategic partnerships. And we put together multiple reports and wrote a white paper to the European Commission in Brussels in June 2024. Just 4 months ago, we had a major conference presenting the white paper and the strategic partnership. But before we did that, we also presented the main findings in different capitals. So in February 2024, I organized a workshop at the Foreign Ministry, and we put everything into the Foreign Ministry. So they read the report, they looked at the way that strategic partnership is now emerging as a key concept for the EU. We told them that this is the way that the EU sees Turkey, but we found something very interesting. And this was in the Foreign Ministry, in the discussion. When we looked at the strategic partnership concept, right? The EU is using it for the first time, of course, in 1988 for Russia and China. But in 2016, 2017, the Turkish Foreign Ministry, for the first time ever, used strategic partnership terminology to define Turkey's relations with the EU. So this was I really love that. And it's because we're presenting this to the Foreign Minister. We had the EU desk, the energy desk, the whatever desk, where everyone is there, including the EU foreign, the responsible person for it. And we said that, we told them, this is 2016-17. You are the ones who are using it for the first time. And the people who have written these reports, they said, well, we didn't mean it as such. What do you mean that? Because this is the comment that came from our European Commission friend. I had a very similar discussion with the European external, I forgot your name, I'm so sorry. Brendan. So I had this discussion at the European External Action Service in June as well with the people who are responsible for external relations, Angelina and Baba. And we told them, we analyzed all the reports, and they said exactly, we don't think anybody reads them, let alone analyze them, because we also have analyzed Borrell's speeches and found out, quantitatively, how many words in how many times are used. And then, Angelina Akars told me, we don't use it as such, but I say, the more you use that word in a repetitive format, it sends a signal. And then, political scientists, social scientists, we have these methodologies. We analyze narratives. We look at keywords and how many times they repeat it. It says something. But these terms are not used. This is, from again, my PhD students here are in art. The way that social scientists and diplomats and bureaucrats approach the same thing is very different. So strategic partnership was used for the Turkish-EU relations by the Turkish Foreign Ministry for the first time in 2017, and the European Commission is using it in 2022 now. But nobody's defining it because strategic partnership is a very elusive concept. Its definition is not clear. It is very wide, it's very elusive, and it fits into formally 10 countries have strategic partnerships with the EU, and 6 intergovernmental organizations have strategic partnerships with the EU. But UK is a strategic partner, Turkey is a strategic partner. All of them are referred in that way without a de facto agreement. But we just published a paper in European Security this month on strategic partnerships, and I confess it to you.
Yes, first of all, let me thank you very much for enlightening discussion and especially regarding the fact that Turkey is still very much through agreements, but also economically anchored in the West, but also with this tension, let's say, with the more anti-Western discourse held by some of its politicians. And this made me think of something I think a couple of weeks ago, Kazım Gülekçius, who's the chief editor of Yeni Asya newspaper, was arrested and is in jail. Now, Yeni Asya was one of those newspapers. It's a new, for those who do not know the newspaper, it's a newspaper that comes from a religious, let's call it religious conservative background close to the community. And that was one of the newspapers that decidedly attacked continuously the government on that particular point, saying you have this anti-Western, anti-imperialist discourse, but on the other hand, you still continue to do whatever you've done together with the West, etc. So, to what extent are these kind of arrests and crackdowns against critical voices not an expression that within government circles there are very deep tensions precisely because of this, let's say, slightly incompatible approaches?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much, both of you, Meltem, for this comprehensive presentation. Now, what I would like to ask is whether there is any impact from the European Union on Turkey. Since you both ended on this optimistic note of convergence, I would like a little bit more practical information on this and not just wishful thinking, in the sense that I keep on wondering why, for instance, the European Union keeps on publishing the reports on Turkey, since really no one pays attention to any of them. So why deal with whether there is, this kind of human rights abuse here or there, since nobody's going to pay attention, nobody's going to put any pressure, or Turkey's going to mind any of this. So what I would like to ask in specific is, in that political field, which is very sensitive, or in any other of the sectors that you spoke about, because obviously in the energy field, there may be, a transactions, but it's not working very much, as I understand it, from that previous discussion. But are there any sectors that we could say that are, working, and there is a sort of...
The energy sector is working, so
Yeah.
Turkey aligns itself with the energy acquis. Turkey did not sign the energy treaty community because if it did so, it would open the Turkish energy market to European companies, but it fully aligns.
But is there any sector, in your opinion, that is really working in terms of, the bilateral relationship? And that could also be some kind of a sector that could be emulated by others as well in order to keep, the ship moving.
Are there any more questions to group together in this final round? All right, so Galip, let me pass the floor to you now to address some of those.
Well, I think, I clearly said in geopolitical terms, because I don't expect much convergence on the domestic. We might see some opening, we will equally can see some closing, we might see some progressive steps being taken, we can equally say worse regressive steps being taken. So I cannot see clearly the direction of the domestic reform. So that's why I said geopolitically. On geopolitics, I see some like partial conversion. For instance, on Russia policy, the Turkey right now is actually, according to also the European and the US assessment, the Turkey is very much compliant with the sanction regime. The concern about the impact of the sanction regime, the Turkish banking industry, which initially was more disposed towards accepting the Russian year system and etc. etc. All of them withdrew, and actually right now I'm hearing that people say that the Turkish financial investors are over complying for the fear of ABCD. We see also the tension reduction in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's also, it's not been resolved. Obviously, that's not, doesn't mean at all any resolution of this. But I think the management of the crisis in itself is quite important when it comes to an intractable one. And as you also rightly indicated previously, this is unfortunately more at the bilateral level rather than the trilateral. So this is more about Turkey and Greece rather than Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. But nevertheless, there is the reduction of tension that, you know, something can be built around it in terms of the Turkish Prime Minister, after quite many years, are being invited to Jimmy meetings. So what that means is, I don't know, the Turkey joined the Western Net, the mineral club. This is also important given that the strategic instrument of this. Recently, there are some concerns regarding China, but it's not only with Turkey, it's also some of the Eastern European Balkan countries that China establishing presence there and then like having access to European market. But despite this, there is much more consciousness with China when it comes to engaging in strategic area. And that's why the middle corridor, despite this passing through Turkey, there is this consciousness vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Turkey and vis-a-vis China, but also China has vis-a-vis Turkey given the Uyghur pressure. And finally, everyone expected the repeat of another purchase of sophisticated weaponry from Russia. The fact that this did not happen and the Turkey returned to the Western sources for defense industry, be it the Eurofighter, be it like the F-16, I think there is some growth. But again, this is like modest, so it's a gradual convergence, and we talk about in comparative senses. And Africa, there is quite significant.
Good.
Maybe you can say a few words on the Yeni Asya case.
Well, I don't know about the case.
Neither do I.
I don't know. I don't know either. But I think the main question that you have, the Turkey's conservative and political Islam relationship with the West is not a uniform one, and that's what you have, like quite a pro-Western one, quite an anti-Western one. Remember, during the Cold War, the Turkish Islamists attacked the leftists and communists in the name of NATO. And you know, think of just personalities. You have Abdullah Gül, which probably among the most pro-Western politicians in the country, or Babacan, etc. And then you also have Erdogan, which has much more, can be equally very anti-Western, but can be equally very pro-Western. So I think this is not a very uniform pictures, and this is already reflected within the government. So within the government, you can easily see quite significant pocket of the pro-Western elements. I would say right now the current foreign and security policy elites and also the economic elites of Turkey quite pro-Western. I mean, you have people like Kalın, Fidan, Şimşek, Cevdet Yılmaz. These are probably one of the some of the most pro-Western elements that you can find, some of the most pro-Western actors that you can find within the Turkish political spheres. But you can also find, in the previous decades, you can also equally count quite many names that will be equally anti-Western. So I think this is a things. I mean,
I was going to ask you actually, is
the late,
sorry to interrupt, but it's just relevant. If there is any, if the post-Erdogan regime might actually give us pointers to a change in strategy, but you're saying can't really tell.
But I think the question, the post-Erdogan Turkish foreign policy will not be anti-Erdogan. It will be different from Erdogan, but it will not be anti-Erdogan. Because on many elements, this is not Erdogan, this is the Turkish state. Like on ISMED, yes, Erdogan give his own flavor, but this would have been very much a state policy. I mean,
Which answers your question.
Exactly.
So there is no division.
Exactly, on Kurdish issue, Erdogan might give it its own flavor, but this is a very state policy. Or to the contrary, or Armenia, like on the one hand, it became the most championing and actively supporting the Azerbaijan, but it's also the government that came closest to use the word, massacre and without using the word genocide, like came closer to those kind of things, like opening up the borders. So the picture is not really black and white, and I think the relation with the West cannot be really understood in terms of opposition government dynamics. Quite part of the opposition would be much more anti-Western than quite many part of the government. And the Islamism as a political ideology, if you start from the late Ottoman period, again, like if you start with Abdülhamid, Abdülhamid was not an anti-Western actor in geopolitical terms, and the Ottoman Islamism was an imperial ideology. In the end, it was the empire, not Khilafah, that formed the overarching framework of the relationship. And this empire was the European empire. So the picture is not really pro and Western, anti-Western categories, cannot really
I
explain.
think this is worth another seminar or two.
Yeah.
But Meltem,
Okay. Well,
wrap up this discussion.
that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't know half of the things that Galip is talking about because, I don't work on the pyramid and everything that comes. But to go back, I didn't hear about this Yeni Asya thing either. But, the answer I would give to that is that internally there are all these kinds of cliques inside Turkey that conflict with one another. And when the conflict becomes too visible, some of them end up in, in facing these kinds of penalties. So it's all about, internal bickering in that manner. Otoncu, you are not correct because Turkey allies. It harmonizes. It's laws and policies in line with the EU acquis. So, and this is already attested by the European Commission, saying that in certain policy areas, from economic to trade to industrial policy to industrial products originating from third countries, Turkish alignment is significant. But Turkish alignment is law in common and foreign security policy. It is law with regards to, or almost non-existent now, with judiciary related matters in the area of human rights. But, as, Galip was also mentioning, when you look at, and something we discussed this here before many times, when you look at the period from 1998 to 2007, 2008, Turkey passed so many constitutional packages, changes of laws from the civic law to the penal law to everything that drastically adjusted Turkish, political and all kinds of administrative rules to the EU as well. And today, if you go on the European General Secretariat website, there you could actually see within each and every national program, there is these national programs for Turkey for every 3 years for accession processes. There is a list of all the laws that have been adopted to align with the EU rules. So if the political environment changes today, and it becomes possible for Turkey to become a member politically, then the adjustment process in economic matters is going to be very, very quick, much quicker than for the Western Balkan countries or for what the Central Eastern European countries had to pass through. In the field of, I'm wrapping it up. In the field of economic and financial matters, for example, when the chapter, which was ready for opening for negotiations, came to the negotiating table in 2007, Nicolas Sarkozy was his first major European Council summit. He said no. And then people asked him, Germany asked him, Sweden asked him, why are you saying no? Then he said, well, this shows that Turkey is able to meet the euro, the Maastricht convergence criteria, the economic financial rules of the European Union at a better stage compared to the ones who just became members, like Bulgaria, like Romania. And it would prejudge, that was Sarkozy's statement. He said it would prejudge the outcome of the negotiations as accession. Why did we start accession negotiations in the first place then? So he vetoed it in 2007, and that chapter was, as Galip was saying, you were saying it for political matters, but they were all these chapters that were vetoed, that were ready for, common position of the European Commission. And it was only in 2015, due to the negotiations over the refugees, that chapter was reopened again, 8 years later. So there are many, many other
So
examples
the
of
concept
that.
of transactionalism then that you're using, there are many other academics, is not the right one. Because if we're talking of convergence, and I do agree with you,
Right.
then it's not right to talk about transactions, because that shows a completely different picture of where relations are going. Transactions is a completely different kind of thing.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So what you're saying is that if you talk too much about transactionalism, we are talking about the non-alignment of the Turkish rules, and therefore the relationship becomes driven only by
It's
areas
leading
of-
as a term.
Yeah, but then transactionalism also is, Karl Deutsch went, transnationalism, transactionalism, when you go all the way back to 1950s, is developed precisely to talk about, functional integration to build a sense of community as well. But let me think about that.
All right, on this note, let's thank you, Meltem, for giving us this rich talk. Our ambition is to have Turkey integrated into the agenda program of the European Study Center as much as possible. So here we haven't given up on Turkey. So hopefully there'll be other events. Thank you for being here with us and hope to see you again.